Most people think that this illustrious flow state is reserved for the high profile CEOs, the professional athletes, the inventors, the musicians, and it's simply not the case. It's not reserved for these elite people. Anybody can tap into flow state if they follow the right formula. And on this video, I'm going to share with you exactly what that formula is. What's up, guys? My name is Nico, a Rapclist. I'm a former college athlete turned entrepreneur, and I've experienced high flow states, and I've also experienced a lot of down, scattered, energetically drawn out stages too. And I have a stark difference, and I know the dichotomy of what it's like to be in that flow state where everything's clicking, and I know what it's like to be anything but that. And so I want to share with you on this video how to get into flow state utilizing this formula that you can get into any time that you want. Okay, so let's dive in. One of the first things that I want you to understand with flow state, it just feels like you're in that state where like nothing can go wrong. You're dialed in, but you're also relaxed at the same time. You know what's going on, but you're also surrendering to the moment quite a bit too. And so it's quite this dichotomy. And I talk a lot on this channel about the woo and the do. And I think that that's just the perfect intersection where you're in a flow state, but you're so dialed in that's like you have control of this. And probably some of the experiences that I've had with this was in my baseball career. Then I've felt it in my business as well. And then another time that it really shows up, I don't do this a whole lot, but every once in a while I'll be doing freestyle rapping with some friends. And you'll get to a point where all of a sudden you kind of like have this zoomed out view where you can't get it wrong. And it's almost like time slows down. And I'm rapping, I'm sharing the words, and then all of a sudden it's just flowing out. It's rhyming, it's witty, it's creative. And then all of a sudden, like I'm in that, but then I'm also like seeing where the words are lining up down the road, like a sentence down the road, a couple words down the road, and I have full autonomy. And so I share all this because I also come from a space where I've had the tendency in the past to really lock up and get frozen up. So if you ever experience that, like in baseball, I would freeze up. It's called the yips. I also previously had, when I was speaking on stage, I would freeze up. So those are like complete stark opposites of like being in flow, when I would like not be able to even make a mistake during baseball if I tried. Everything was just flowing. My body felt nice. Entrepreneur, like making deals, speaking from stage, just so in the moment, just witty things coming off the top of my head that I didn't even plan. And then on the flip side is where I couldn't even say something if I tried. And so I really want you to understand the power of flow and getting into a flow state, because it's the most optimal state that you possibly can be in, because it's really just a fulfilling, transformative state that you're in. And if you just embrace that and make that your new default as much as you possibly can, you can rewire your brain to just be in flow state more often. Okay, so I really want that for you, and it's literally your superpower as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an athlete. And let's dive in. So one of the first things that you have to understand about flow state is that if something is too boring or it's too challenging, then you're never going to get into flow state. That's one of the biggest principles, that you have to know that you got to find this intersection. Mainly, like I think about it like a 7 out of 10 on a challenge. So if it's 6 or below on a challenge, you're not going to get into flow state because you're going to be somewhat bored. But if it's a 9, 10, 11 on the challenge, it's going to be so challenging that you're going to get into more of an anxious state, and you're not going to be able to get into that flow. So it's really about picking those tasks or those experiences that are in that realm of the 7, maybe an 8 state, that will allow you to get into that flow more frequently. So just understand that first and foremost. So number one, what is one of the first things? Well, it's really getting clear on the goal or the mission or the vision of what you really want to create within that flow state, right? If you just sit down, you just start working on something, you start working on your business plan, or you start working on your marketing strategy. If you just sit down like, all right, I'm going to do this, that doesn't really do it. Our brains operate when they have specific and clear goals, and they know the outcome of that, what they want to experience. So just think about that, like write down what it is. Like, I want to send out 200 outbound messages to the primary ICP, the leads that I have set out. Or I want to, whatever it is, visualize seeing myself hitting 200 free throws in a row. Like whatever it is, like have it specific, have it be clear. And that's one of the most important things. If you don't have this, like you really can't get to the next spot. Okay. So have clear, have specific goals, know the outcome that you're getting out of this experience. And that's going to be like one of the biggest game changers to the whole entire thing. The next thing is focus. Okay. The worst thing that you can do is be distracted during this time and not giving yourself an allotted amount of time. I recommend 30, 60, 90 minutes at minimum to be into this flow state and cutting out distractions. Because here's the thing is that if you get distracted, a lot of people think that is, oh, I'll get a text message and then I'll get out of flow state and then I'll get right back into it. That's not necessarily the case. They've done countless studies that show us that when we get quote unquote distracted, which could be simple as getting a text message and just seeing, oh, Steve sent me a text message, and you just get back to work, that literally blocks off and distracts you and gets you off track for about 20 minutes. Okay, so understand that distractions are the antithesis to flow state. You have to be in a flow state. And that's generally the thing that I want to continue to share on this channel and help you guys understand is one of the most important things is thinking longer term. I have such a beef with short form social media these days because it keeps us in a short form and distractive state, which is honestly like one of the worst states, especially to flow state, right? You have to be thinking about long form, long term. Instead of 3-second videos, it's 30-minute videos, 60-minute videos, 90-minute videos. Instead of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, go deep on one thing. And in this case, whatever it is for you in terms of your flow state, make sure that you're sitting down for 30, 60, 90 minutes, because if you're not, you're just simply not giving yourself the space to actually get into that flow state, which usually happens around 10 to 15 minutes in. So not only if you're getting distracted, then it's going to take a hard time to get back into the process of getting into the flow state, but it's like it literally takes you about 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes even longer, of being in a flow process to actually get into that flow state where it really starts sinking in and it just starts flowing, right? Because if you're constantly getting distracted, which most of the world is, then you have to realize that you're probably not going to get into flow state. But if you can commit to that 30, 60, 90 minutes, again, I probably prefer 90 minutes, set a timer and say, all right, I'm blocking out all distractions, put on do not disturb on your phone, like, take out all the tabs you possibly can, except for the one tab that you're working on. And you work on that for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and know that like at that tail end of that 15, 20 minutes is when you're actually going to be starting to step into flow. Okay. That's how all these amazing athletes have performed, is because they're so locked in. And some of the things that I think about too, that I notice when I'm at a flow state, is that when my body is relaxed, but my mind is sharp. And so I think about that with my eyes. Like I was even playing pickleball yesterday, where I was popping in and out of flow state. And I was noticing that when I was out of flow state, I was kind of like in my head thinking a lot, and my body was even a little bit of tense. And so I even reflect on my baseball career, is like when I got into flow state, the best was when I was relaxed in my body. I'd be taking big deep breaths, but at the same time I'm locked in, just like what I'm doing right now. Like my body's pretty relaxed, I'm pretty cognizant of where my body's at right now, and then I'm dialed in, just staring at the camera, talking to you guys that are listening to this. So it's like locked in, tiger eyes, but also relaxed in the body. And if you can find that match and marry those two, of being locked in with your eyes but also relaxed in your body, and just feeling like it's all one thing, rather than like, oh, my mind and my eyes and then my body, it's just like immersing all of it. And so I share a lot of this, and I've shared some of these things on my previous videos. I talked about this on the 2026 World Series, is that a lot of these players, they'll develop something called the yips. And it's because they're like compartmentalizing, and then they're trying to think like, oh, what's the grip? Oh, what I gotta do, like, oh, the arm motion. Instead, if they just would think about like it's all the whole, like don't think it's separate from one or the other, that's where you get into trouble. But when you're just really in a flow state where everything's kind of molding together. And you really start understanding this when you get into a flow state. I'm sure if you've experienced that at all, you know what that's like. If you're watching this video, I have to imagine that you've been in flow state a time or two in your life. Reflect on those times and start dissecting, what was it? How were you? Were you present in the moment? Were you thinking about a million things? So it's also about finding your own flow state. Okay. So if you can find that and you can find out what is your flow state, that's what's going to even be more powerful. And that's why I always recommend doing some sort of after action review. After you're in that flow state, then you go back to it and be like, okay, what did I do well? What can I improve upon? Because as athletes and business owners, we can be very hard on ourselves, right? When you're like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done this, should have done this. But if that's all you're doing, you're just feeding like, oh, I could have improved and I could have improved, it kind of beats you down. And then therefore you have this association with like, even though I got into flow state, I didn't achieve the absolute amazing goal. So therefore it wasn't worth it. So if you can just get into that mode of, reflecting back and noticing like where you were from like an energetic standpoint, like where you locked in with your eyes, where are you locked in with your body, where are you relaxed, where are you having fun, where are you relaxing, like where are you like just in a flow? Just think about that. Where are you in a flow? And then identify where you were not in a flow. Okay, with all that said, is we have to start identifying a couple other things to make sure that we get into flow state and we stay into flow state. Okay, that's the biggest thing, is like some people will pop into flow state, but they don't stay in flow state. And so here are a couple other things that are really going to help you stay in flow state so that it actually becomes part of your life rather than just like, oh yeah, I got into flow state that one time. And one of the biggest things is having a ritual. See, our brains are very highly programmable. Our minds are very highly programmable because our brains have this neuroplasticity. I made a post on my Instagram about this, but it's showing like the microscopic lens of the neurons inside of our brain. And it was showing like what gets repeated. What I say that is more so like from a Dr. Joe Dispenza, what fires together, wires together. And you'll notice on that post is that when these neurons fire and wire together, and it's basically just like you're repeating the same thing over and over, it starts building out these neural connections where then it recognizes that. So then when you have that ritual that I'll get into here in a second, but if you have that ritual that you come back to every time and then you get into flow state, there's going to be a neural connection with that. So ritual, flow state, ritual, flow state, ritual, and you keep on doing that over and over. Eventually it's just going to be like, oh, ritual, your brain thinks that you're already in flow state, and you're going to be so much more likely to actually get into flow state quicker because of that. So understand that ritual before you get into flow state is absolutely imperative. And the best people that are the best at getting into flow state are the ones that have that pre-ritual. And so for me, what I always recommend, as I've been talking about on this video, is that like getting into a relaxed state. And so it's funny because I even was thinking about this recently. Like if I were to give myself advice as a baseball player that had the challenges with the yips and was like getting really tense, like I would have myself develop a really strong meditation and mindfulness and relaxation practice. So like even if it's just simple as 3 short breaths. And I'm so much more relaxed because of that. But if I were to do that right before I set my goals of whatever I'm sitting down to, exactly like this on this video, like literally this is a case point, an example of when I'm getting into flow state, is that like I did a ritual before this. I set a goal that I want to make at least a 20-minute video and provide a lot of value and let it just like really flow out of me. I had my structure, I had my points, I knew exactly what I wanted to like break down on this video, draw on some reference experiences, some stories, and then I do some breaths and I really get into that mode of like, all right, what is my pre-ritual flow state? So if it's just those first 3 breaths, for me, like I even meditated for about 10-15 minutes before that with my girlfriend down out in the sun, and I really focused on that, dialed in breathing, but also the tiger eyes and the relaxed body. Like I really did that. And like what I've noticed for me personally is that when I can start sensing and noticing when my face starts tensing up. And sometimes it's very slight and little, but like even just like a little on my cheek or like up by my eye, and I just notice, and then I just relax. So it's like I scrunch up and I relax, and I just notice like my face will, go and tense up a little bit, and it's again very slight, but I just practice that and practice that and practice that. So I'm getting in the state and I'm getting in the mood, in the mode of just relaxing more. And the more that I can do that, the more I'm going to be able to, have that as my pre-ritual, so that I can get into flow state and I can make a video that I'm so much more dialed in, rather than thinking about, oh, what do I got to say? What do I got to say? Okay. So have that pre-ritual before you get into that flow state, before you start on that 30, 60, 90 day or 90 minute sprint when you're going and doing your work, or whatever you're doing, whether you're, swimming or going and shooting basketball, like doing something that will really get into that relaxed, but like focused, tiger eyes mode, so that you can get the most out of that time and get into flow state a lot quicker and easier. Because if you can get into flow state quicker and easier, that means you'll spend more time in flow state and you won't be able to get distracted as much. And then of course, like the more you do that, it's training your mind that like, oh, we can do this, we can do this. Because the goal really is not to just be isolated where you can get into flow state and then you're out of flow state. It's like to live your life in more of a flow state. Okay. Which there's another really key point to all of that I'll explain here in a second. Okay. And then the last one is that there has to be a reason behind getting into flow state. You can't just be like, all right, I want superpowers. If you've ever watched that video called Limitless with Bradley Cooper, I mean, that's ultimately what it was showing, is that we're getting into flow state with the pill, the Limitless pill. So what if we could, instead of like saying I'm in flow state or out of flow state, what if I could just start living my life in flow state more and more? And so again, it comes down to doing that pre-ritual, having the goals, having it very clear on what you're going after. Be challenged enough, but also not be too challenged. Like everything that I've talked about already, but it's got to be meaningful to you. You can't just do it because like someone told you to get into flow state, right? It's got to be something that's really important to you, that hits deep. And so one thing that I'll share with this, and then I'll tell you about really the last key component to getting into flow state and living in more of a flow state, is that compiles what I talked about in the beginning of like, you got to get clear. You got to know what you're doing and what you're getting clear on for that flow state, and the deeper reason behind it. And that's one of the biggest reasons on why we created the Vision Quiz. It's a powerful technology that we developed. It took me about 20 years to develop this and distill it down into technology. I've invested north of $250,000 into the development of this, as well as a lot of other things that we're doing inside of Vision Espresso. But it helps you get clear, and it helps you get clear on the reason why you're doing the things. And when you have that, it makes it so much easier to get into flow state, because again, those are the bookends of flow state, of being very clear on what you're doing in that flow state section, but also the deeper reason why behind it, of why you're doing. Because if you're so deeply connected to what you're doing, why you're getting into flow state, it's just going to be so much easier. And then again, you start living more of a flow state lifestyle, rather than just like getting into pockets of flow state. Okay. So that's really, really important. So if you want to go check out the Vision Quiz, you can go to visionespresso.co. It takes you about 20 minutes. Some entrepreneurs have increased their clarity by up to 108% in less than 20 minutes. Links are down in the video description. But the last thing I want to share around this whole flow state is I want you to think about it. It's like a battery. Okay. And so it'll drain your battery. If you're just always in flow state, it drains the battery. Now, what happens when the battery gets down to zero? Obviously, you can't just keep on getting into flow state because you don't have enough juice left. Right? So that doesn't work for anybody. And that's why one of the biggest and most key components to getting and staying in flow state is rest. One of the best quotes that I've ever heard is, when you're tired, rest. If we're living our lives regularly, think about that as like it drains 1% at 1 minute. But if we're in flow state, it's essentially like we're draining 2% a minute. So it's like double. Like it requires a lot more octane and fuel to get into flow state and stay in flow state. So just think about it from that lens. And so when we are draining our battery quicker because we're using more fuel, more octane fuel, more of the high premium fuel, then we have to go and fill that fuel back up quicker, because it just drains quicker. So what I'm really getting at is that rest is of the utmost importance to flow. because if you're not staying in flow, it's because of the fact that your battery is draining really quickly and you're not coming back and giving it proper rest. So when you're tired, rest. Okay. Again, when you're tired, rest. One of the best pieces of advice that I can ever give, because that was the best piece of advice that I got. So getting into flow state is required to have more rest. So when you're tired, rest. It's going to help you fill your battery back up so you'll have more fuel to get back into flow states. Okay. So that's the rundown on flow state, guys. Really important to have that goal. Make sure that it's challenging, but not too challenging. Make sure that you're getting proper rest to fuel up that battery. Make sure that it's important to you. Make sure that you're ridding yourself of distractions when you're getting into that 30, 60, 90-minute section of that flow. Make sure that you have a deeper reason on why you're doing it. Give yourself the time and the space. Make sure that it's important to you, the reasons why, and then make sure, again, as mentioned, is fuel back up. Don't always try to think that you can be in flow all the time. You got to rest, give yourself that space so that you can fuel up and come back even stronger. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Make sure and subscribe to the channel, share it with some other people, and we'll talk to you soon.